the Baen Free Radio Hour.
Hello and welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. Today on the show, newcomer Hailey Gregor interviews Kacey Ezell on editing the Noir anthologies Noir Fatale, No Game for Knights, and Down These Mean Streets. After that, we bring you part 2 of the serialization of Mark Van Name's John and Lobo novel, One Jump Ahead.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. My name is Hailey, H.Y. Gregor, and today I have the honor of bringing you guys a really cool behind-the-scenes look at a really excellent and creative anthology, or series of anthologies really, about noir that was brought to you guys by Baen Books, edited by Larry Correia and Kacey Ezell. They are Noir Fatale, No Game for Knights, and Down These Mean Streets. They are all out now, available in your favorite ebook formats. They all have audiobooks, paperback, hardcover. I actually think Down These Mean Streets is not yet available in paperback. That one is on its way when I checked last, but the rest of them are.
Market. Yeah.
It is. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have none other than the excellent Kacey Ezell, author and co-editor. So Kacey was born in South Dakota in 1977. Her parents joined the U.S. Air Force in 1984, and she grew up around the world on various military bases. When she was 7, her mother gave her a copy of Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Drums, and shortly thereafter, Kacey decided that she wanted to be a dragon rider when she grew up. In 1999, she followed her parents into the family business and graduated from the United States Air Force Academy before going to pilot training. As dragons were in short supply at the time, she reasoned that flying aircraft was the next best thing. She earned her wings in 2001 and has over 3,000 hours in the UH-1N, Mi-17, and EC-130 helicopters. From the time she was a small child, Kacey made up stories to tell her friends and family. And now she does, and she writes in many, many genres. So thanks so much for joining us, Kacey.
Yeah, nice job with my bio, dude. You didn't mess up the helicopter names at all.
I know some people who would be very disappointed in me if I did, but...
So the one that usually gets people is EC-130 because in the Air Force that's a fixed wing aircraft, but in the civilian helicopter world it's a Eurocopter helicopter. That's the one that I flew for EMS. So anyway, little digression.
Well, see here, ignorance then is my gift because I didn't know that, so I couldn't get tripped up on it. I will take that and run with it. But Kacey, you have worked really hard on these anthologies. It is not a small feat to edit one, let alone 3. I know that there is a little bit of a story as to how you get the idea, how you pitched this. Can you sort of give us the origin to how it all got started?
Yeah, of course. So back in... I don't know what year. It was like the 20-teens, probably somewhere between 2015 and 2017. I was honored to have a story in John Ringo's Black Tide Rising anthology. And that anthology did really well. There was a lot of buzz about it. It was a very fun experience to participate in that. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I really like this feeling. We should do more of this. And around that same time, I kind of I went through one of my periodic noir phases where like I go back and read some of my favorite stories, particularly by Raymond Chandler, who's like, you know, my favorite noir author of all time. And I watch a bunch of movies and it's a thing I do every couple of years. I don't know. It's probably related to some freaking moon cycle or something. I don't know, but
not gonna overanalyze that one.
but you know, so I was going through one of my periodic noir phases, and I had this idea for a story, and I wrote it down, and I was talking with Christopher Smith, with whom I collaborated on Gunpowder and Embers with him and John Ringo, and he and I were talking a bunch of the time, and he read the story and he was like, "This is really good. You know, what do you want to do with it?" And so like I shopped it around. I submitted it to like Ellery Queen and a couple of other places. I mean, it wasn't quite right for them, but the whole time I was thinking what I really want to do with it is have it be in a Baen anthology like Black Tide Rising. But as far as I knew that there wasn't one coming out. And so I was like, well, what if I made one come out? And around this time, just coincidentally, Larry he had just published, I think, the final book in his Grimoire series. Either he had just published it or I just read it. I can't remember exactly. But I remember I had been reading the Grimoire series and loved it and thought it was fantastic. And I said to myself, you know who would be a really good champion for this idea would be Larry Correia. And so I kind of like put that in the memory bank and thought about it for a little while. And as it turned out, that following LibertyCon, Larry was one of the guests who was going to be there. I think he might have been a guest of honor. And I was going to LibertyCon as well. So I reached out to Rich Groller, the director of programming, and I said, hey, Rich, I have a panel idea and I'd be happy to moderate it. Wouldn't it be fun to talk about kind of the intersection of noir and science fiction and fantasy and how those two genres sort of mash up real well. And I think it would be great for Larry because he's got this series, that is, I think he had just, I want to say it was pretty newly that he had just completed it because it was kind of like in the news or whatever. But I was like, this would be great for Larry. I'm happy to moderate it, all of the above. And Rich was like, yeah, I love it. Let's do it. So he scheduled the panel. And I like went all out for this thing. Like I got all dressed up in like a pencil skirt and backseam stockings. Like the one thing that I wanted that I didn't get was like a fascinator hat with like the birdcage veil. I just couldn't get one in time. But like my whole thing was like, I'm going to dress like a 1940s femme fatale out of a noir film, right? Just sort of set the mood. And we did the panel. It was very well attended at LibertyCon. Everybody had a really good time. Just by the grace of God and the scheduling people at LibertyCon, immediately after that panel was a dinner for authors associated with Baen, and that was held at a place called the Hot Chocolatier, which is in downtown Chattanooga. It's a fantastic candy store, and so we went from the panel immediately over to that. And it was great. It worked out perfectly, right? So I'm there, and I'm like scheming this thing with Chris and my buddy and who you also know, Griffin Barber. We were sitting there at the table, and Griffin's like, "Hey, Larry's right there. You should go pitch him." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, do it." And I was like, "All right." So I went over and I was like, "Hey, Larry, I really enjoyed that panel. Thank you so much." He was like, "Yeah, me too. You did a good job." And I was like, "Thanks." I just thought the discussion was interesting, and he was like, "Yeah, I did too." And I was like, "Really? You want to do an anthology with me? I'll do all the work and you can just put your name on it and we'll make a bunch of money." And he goes, "You should always pitch every project like that. Go ahead and tell me more."
You do nothing and make money.
Well, and to be fair, Larry did not do nothing, but he did quite a bit. But that was my line, I guess. And so anyway, we talked about it. And he was like, "Actually, I love this idea. I can't do it this year, but let's talk to Tony about it next year." And we did, and we refined the idea. And in 2017, Noir Fatale came out, and so that was the first one. And it was the theme of the story. What we ended up doing is we ended up kind of niching down the theme a little bit to be science fiction fantasy stories that focus on the archetype of the femme fatale, which is one of like the classic noir character archetypes that, I love exploring and I love thinking about. And, I've got like half a dozen, actresses going through my head right now who've played these great femme fatale type characters. Right. And so it was really fun to put that together, to invite these authors to contribute. And man, the authors that we got were just like, we got such amazing stories. They were so great to work with. Putting it together was just, they made my job so easy that I was really spoiled, right? Because you were like, "Oh, it's a lot of work to put together an anthology." Well, that one really wasn't. Like, they made it so, like, the process was so smooth because everybody was just so good. The stories were so good, and we released it, and it did well enough that, we were able to make a good case to do a couple more. And so then we followed up with No Game for Nights, which I think came out in 2021, if I recall correctly. And that one, so we had, we wanted to kind of give equal time to the dudes. So this one, No Game for Nights, was themed around the the archetype of the detective. And then down these mean streets, we decided to close it out by doing one themed around the Noir city. So that's how it went.
So it wasn't always supposed to be 3. Was
No,
it
originally
pitched
it was
like
just
that
the
originally?
one. Yeah,
Okay.
it was originally just the one.
So why did you start with the femme fatale? I know you said that that's something you really love. Was there like a debate where you were trying to decide to do that versus the detective, or was it always where you wanted to start?
So I think the thing that kind of, when we initially pitched it to Tony was saying, I like this idea, but it's a little too broad. I need you guys to kind of narrow your focus a little bit. And I had a story that I had written, that kind of started the whole thing. And I looked at my story, and the thing about my story, I think it's called Spoils of War, is that it's told from the point of view of the femme fatale, which is maybe a minor spoiler, but the book's been out for almost 10 years. So listen at your own risk, I guess. But so that was sort of the thing that kind of was like, well, what if we explored that a little more fully? And when I pitched that to Tony, when Larry and I pitched that to Tony, she was like, yes, absolutely. Yes. So it was kind of funny too, because Larry, for better or for worse, Larry's somewhat of a controversial figure. And he was like, I'm not sure people will enjoy me telling stories about specifically, a female character. And I was like, Larry, I'm going to stop you right there. Like, look at your female characters that you write. He has, his character of Faye from the Grim Noir series is a fantastic character. His, what's her name from the Monster Hunter International series is just a fantastic female character.
I say Julie.
Julie, yeah, Julie Shackelford, who coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, looks a lot like his wife. But
I heard that there was not a coincidence there.
no. Yeah, but yeah. So like he's really good at writing complex, interesting female characters with complex, interesting motivations, So I was like, no, that's a cop out, Larry. We're not gonna do that, so we didn't.
Well, and I mean, to that point, even in that anthology, they are not all written from female perspective. And in fact, one of your female authors, Hinckley's story, is written from a male perspective.
Yep.
And is very femme fatale, but absolutely it hits a lot of those detective beats as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was, and I'm glad you mentioned Hinckley, because it was really fun to work with her. So Hinckley Korea is Larry's daughter. And when we were making our lists of people that we wanted to invite, there's a formula, right? And I didn't know this until I started this project, but there's a formula for a successful anthology. And this is per Tony Weisskopf. It's like, you want about 1/3 of, headliners or big names, people whose name on the cover is going to sell it to their fans, right? And then you want about 1/3 mid-listers or up and coming people. And then you want like 1/3 new voices to, develop new writers and expose them to other audiences, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were making our 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 list. And Larry was like, hey, I'd like to include Hinckley because she's got this idea she told me about. And I think it would be a good one. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm down. Let's do it. I think she was still in high school at the time. And he was like, okay, but she's my kid. So I'm going to need you to edit her. And I was like, okay, no problem. And so I actually got to be, I was the first editor for all of them, except my own. I just sent mine to Larry for him to edit. And then I would go through and edit my edit pass. I would send it to Larry. Larry would go through, and if he saw anything, which most of the time he didn't, most of the time he was really hands off. Then he would come back and say, yeah, this is good or whatever, or maybe we could tweak this bit. And then the edits would go back to the author for them to adjudicate. But with Hinckley's, I looked at them, I sent them to him, and he was basically like, yep, looks good. Because he didn't want to be, he was afraid, he didn't want to mix dad and editor, you know what I mean? Which, I think that's respectable. So, but yeah, her story was fantastic, and I had a lot of fun working with her on it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading that one. And I can also see perhaps Larry being more hesitant because it was also urban fantasy, which is what a lot of his stuff is in. So
right.
trying to like not step on toes and let the creative process work its way out without other voices in your head. So.
Yeah. And, the other thing too, is that it's entirely true that he can say, yeah, no, this story entirely made it on its own effort, like on its own, not effort, but merit, because I didn't really have anything to do with it, which he didn't. I did. So
no, I think that's excellent. So how did you guys go about selecting who you wanted in this first anthology, authors wise? Did you look at like past works that were related to the theme?
Yeah, somewhat. So one of my dream bucket list things was to actually work with Laurel K. Hamilton, because I've been a Laurel K. Hamilton fan since my 20s. And I actually have a really, really sort of personal connection story with her. When my best friend Tammy was killed in Afghanistan in 2003, Tammy was the one who introduced me to Laurel's work in the first place. And while I was, going through the process of grieving her, I actually wrote a letter to Laurel in care of her publisher at Valentine, and just was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know you were my friend's favorite author. Your work really meant a lot to her. Because Tammy she, like most of us, she's a very complex person. And one of the things that really spoke to her about Laurel's work was this idea that darkness, like if you have, darkness in your soul, that doesn't make you evil, right? It just means that you have darkness in your soul, and that was something that really resonated with her and really meant a lot to her. And so for some reason, I felt like I wanted to pass that along to Laurel and basically thank her for inspiring my friend. And so I did that, and she wrote back, which I never in a million years expected, but she did. And she wrote me this beautiful letter that was, just very gracious and full of condolences. And I still have it. Right. And so I was a fan before that, but when you have that kind of interaction, it's like, okay, yep, you're right. She could write trash for the rest of her life and I will still be a super fan, because that was beautiful. Right. To be clear, she has not written trash. She's a very talented author and I love her work. but so getting Laurel K. Hamilton on the list, because she's perfect for it, right? Her Anita Blake series and her Mary Gentry series, both of them are urban fantasy with significant shades of noir, especially in the Mary Gentry series, where the main character is in fact a detective as well as a fairy princess. That's exactly the kind of thing we wanted, right? So turns out Larry knows her. They're friends, and he was like, oh yeah, I could ask Laurel. And I was like, that would be awesome. You could ask Laurel. That'd be great. So he approached her and she agreed. She agreed to do it. And she gave us a fantastic story in the Anita Blake universe. In the first one, the first and the third ones have Anita Blake stories. And so that was part of the process for getting her to come on board. Was basically Larry just asked her. We also looked at for other sort of bigger names, we also looked at we invited David Weber, who wrote us a fantastic Honorverse story. That's really, really cool. It's kind of like a cool corner of the Honorverse that it's, it was like, wow, this is really noir. I was thinking it was going to be a little bit more sci-fi with shades of noir, but nope, it's very noir. So that was, all of that was looking at okay, who are the kind of people who we know can tell these kind of stories that we think would be enthusiastic about this project, and that their fans would be enthusiastic about it. Because, you don't do a project like this to not make money, right? You want the book to sell. So that's how we kind of chose our headliners, for lack of a better word. And then when it came to sort of mid-listers and newer voices, most of those were Larry's pick, because I myself was a very new voice. So I was like, well, I would like a story. And they're like, yes, Kacey, you get a story. And I'm like, can I suggest one other person? And they're like, you can suggest 2 more people. I was like, great. So one of the people that I specifically wanted to include was Christopher Smith, because he and I had been talking about this whole thing the whole time, and he worked with Michael Ferguson to give us like a fantastic story called Ain't No Sunshine.
Ain't No Sunshine.
Yeah, like the song is so beautiful. And it hit all the right notes, pun intended, so well that we put it at the very beginning because it started it off perfectly. So I'm gonna have to go listen to that song now.
It has been stuck in my head a lot while I have been reading these books and research. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. It's a fantastic song. No regrets.
Because every time I pull up my list, that one's right at the top. So
yeah, that's Bill Withers, I think. Yeah. So
well, okay. So on the note, you talked about David Weber's story and how you're expecting a lot more sci-fi in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to be clear, it was really sci-fi. I was just impressed with how well he hit the noir notes, if that makes sense.
So that was going to be my question. With all of these, you have a lot of fantasy and science fiction authors writing these stories. And so the settings are ridiculously diverse, right? Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of different takes on things. What did you think worked really, really well with people who were trying to take like this fantasy noir or like the high sci-fi noir and push them together? What was fun about that?
Just the incredible creativity that each of the authors gave us. I mean, Bob Buettner's story, which Bob Buettner is one of, I think there are 4 of us, including Larry and me. No, 5, because Griffin's in all of them too. There are 5 of us who are in each of these. It's me, Larry, Bob Buettner, Griffin Barber, and Laurel K. Hamilton are the 5 people who are in every single one of these. And Bob, first of all, Bob Buettner is just like the consummate professional, right? Like I would send him the pitch, be like, are you interested? And he was like, yep, here's my idea. And I was like, Bob, that sounds fantastic. He's like, okay. And then like a month prior to the deadline, he's like, here's your story. And it was perfect. Like almost no edits required. Perfect. You know, I've never had that happen before. but his first story in Noir Fatale, when I first started reading it, I was like, ooh, okay, this is like a young adult, like romance, like first love kind of story. This is okay. All right. And then I got to the end of it and I was like, oh, you know, because it like, I couldn't see how it fit into the noir bit of it until I got to the very end. And then I was like, and then it was clear. It was so clear that like the whole time, it just made so much sense. And it's hard to describe the sort of revelation that we had. But when I got it, I got it and I read through it and I didn't even do any edits on it. I sent it to Larry and I was like, hey, read all the way through this one and tell me what you think. And he came back and said basically the same thing. He was like, I was skeptical, but oh my God, is it good? And I was like, yeah. So it's I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I think it's like the Ice Queen or something like that. But I know I've got it right here. I should look.
Because there were so many good ones. Yeah.
Yeah. It's called The Frost Queen. It's oh man, it's fantastic. But yeah, I was so impressed with how well he was. Sorry, now I gotta fuss with this. There we go. I was so impressed with how well he was able to work in all the noir threads in such a subtle way that I didn't even realize they were happening until I had read the whole thing. And that was like that's just, I don't know, virtuosity, I guess. You know, career goals to get that good.
Well, and I think especially in a genre that has some really unique kind of expectations, or like really hard-hitting kind of things, and there's not a ton of them, like you really have to nail them on the head. So that is really cool, being able to do it subtly in a genre that sometimes is not so subtle.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so going into those, there were a couple of these that I was able to hit, and all of the stories that I got to read were fantastic. You talked about Ain't No Sunshine by Christopher Smith and Michael Ferguson. So that one is the anchor. It's the first story for the whole series.
Yep.
And for me, one of the cool things that I thought was the science fiction setting for that one.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about how he pulled in all the noir elements while having it take place basically in a spaceship?
Yeah. So one of the things that Chris and Michael did that was so smart, I think, was they really leveraged that, like, the sense of nostalgia. Because, like, if you think about it, like when we sit down and we watch, you know, Farewell, My Lovely, or the Maltese Falcon, or Casablanca, there's a sense of nostalgia, right? And it's kind of funny because for us, like at, you know, my age, and certainly at your age, you're like 10 years younger than me. These are not things we experience, but we're still nostalgic for them because they exist in like the pop culture sort of collective imagination, right? Like, I never lived in the 40s, you know, I never rode a streetcar, but when I watch movies that have those things in them, like, I feel that sense of nostalgia, right? And so nostalgia is as much a part of the noir genre at this point in the game as anything else, right? As any other sort of like trope. And Chris and Michael really leaned into that with having their character be, you know, sort of interested and obsessed with like nostalgic things that were sometimes in conflict with, you know, his life and his setting there in that orbital spaceship. And I thought that was a really creative and smart, like real smart twist, you know, to still be able to have that feel, but also still have it be realistically sci-fi, if that's not a oxymoron.
No, I thought it was great. I really loved reading that one. And of course they all hit the like devastating, sexy, dangerous, like
Yep.
really on point, kind of on top of their game women, which was
Yep.
a blast in that whole anthology. And we talked a little bit about Kuro by Hinckley Correa, and
Mhm.
that one I think could probably have fit into either the Noir Fatale or the No Game for Nights, because it is the detective story, but it's also a ghost story, which
Yes.
is more spoilers.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Were there anything in that you thought that hit like the noir notes particularly well for her?
I loved the aesthetics of that story, right? So you know, when I talk about science fiction noir, what a lot of people think about is like, oh, you mean like cyberpunk, like, which yes maybe, or oh, like Blade Runner, which yes maybe, you know, yes, and like all of those things. There are of course crossovers, right? And the aesthetics of Hinckley's story, Kuro, they really, like, it really brought in that sort of like Rick Deckard, um, you know, Blade Runner feel, but it in an urban fantasy setting instead of like a science fiction setting. And I loved that attention to detail, you know, and that the way that she sort of set that scene and everything.
So as you started collecting stories for any of them, were there any surprises or things that you weren't expecting, things you enjoyed you thought maybe you wouldn't?
So the biggest surprise was actually in No Game for Nights, and it was Laurel K. Hamilton's story. She sent me a story called Sammy Oakley and I don't want to get
And the
wrong.
Jewel of Amurakai. I'm going to say it wrong.
Yes.
I actually was going to ask about that one later too.
Oh my goodness. So it is this perfect detective story. It absolutely 100% hits all the notes on the nose, and it's funny because it's like small woodland creatures, which was not what I was expecting from, you know, the queen of necromancers and vampire urban fantasy. You know what I mean? But it's such a good story, and the mystery is awesome in it. You know, the interactions between the detective woodland creature, he's like a squirrel, and the other furry
He's
creatures.
A gray squirrel, not a red squirrel, because the gray squirrels are the fighters.
Correct. That is correct. Yes. That was a point that he made. But yeah, it was just like, it was so good. And like, I read it and I was like, why? Like, why is this so good? I loved it. So that was the biggest surprise. The second biggest surprise was probably in Noir Fatale was Bob Buettner's The Frost Queen story, because again, you start reading it and you're like, this is like teenagers falling in love. Like, where's the, and then it hits and you're like, oh, there it is. It's been there the whole time. Awesome. So
those kind of stories are great because they're more fun to reread because you pick more things up the second time. Like, you know what to look for.
Yes. 100%.
No, when I read Sammy Oakley, I looked at the title and I was like, Indiana Jones and the Thing, right? Because the way that it's written. And it took me a page and a half. It is not immediately evident that he is a squirrel.
No.
And then they say something about the woman that he's talking to being a chipmunk, and I was like, this is a metaphor for something. No, she is an actual chipmunk.
She's a chipmunk.
It came out of nowhere.
Story. Yeah. I remember when I I accepted it from Laurel and I wrote back and I was like, well, this was a wild ride, but I love it. And she was like, thanks. It was a little bit of a wild ride to write it.
Yes.
So I was like, man, I kind of hope you develop it. So I don't know. We'll see. She's real busy with her main money-making series right now, I'm sure, but it would be cool to see a Sammy Oakley book in the future.
Yeah. Redwall Noir.
Redwall Noir, yes!
It's a new genre.
That's right. You heard it here first, folks.
Well, okay. So did she pitch that to you, or did it just show up in your inbox?
No, so no, she didn't pitch it at all. We actually, because we had done Fatale. It had done well. We had, we approached Tony about doing another one. And actually, this is funny. This is why we did 3 instead of 2, because we approached Tony about doing another one, focusing on the detective. And she was like, yeah, I'm in. Well, what do you think for a title? And Larry and I had discussed it, and both of these, No Game for Nights and Down These Mean Streets, they both come from Raymond Chandler quotes, and we couldn't decide which one we liked best. So we were like, well, we like both of these. Which one do you like better? And she goes, I like them both. Do 2 anthologies. So we were like, okay. So we had done the invite letter, we had done the invite letter for No Game for Nights, and we sent it out to Laurel and to the other authors that we invited, and she came back right away and she was like, yeah, that sounds great, I'd love to. And so we did the contract and everything like that, and then didn't hear anything for a couple months, but that's fine because the deadline wasn't until like several months later. And then like towards the end of that time, it just showed up in my inbox. She's like, here you go, it's a little different, but I think you'll like it. Yep, both of those things were true. So yeah,
it was nice to kind of have something a little lighter though. With these, because the stories are all obviously pretty dark, right? The themes are dark, the streets are dark.
Yeah. Well, and that one's got darkness to it too, but it's also super cute, so.
So when you guys were curating these, were you looking to have some hope injected into some of the stories?
Absolutely.
Was that something you struggled with?
No, because one of the things that Larry and I agreed on, and Tony weighed in on too, is that yes, noir means darkness, but it doesn't mean noir is not the same as grimdark, right? And noir is like, I forget how I said it, but there was a line that I had in the pitch document that I repurposed for the invite document that said something along the lines of, it's the knowledge that the hero doesn't always get the girl, or that doing the right thing doesn't always mean that you're going to get the girl. Do the right thing anyway. It's that kind of of there's darkness, but there's also like light too. Like we're always striving for that hope, and every story that we got, I think everybody sort of kind of grokked that, from the beginning, that we weren't looking for grimdark. We wanted stories that were unflinching, but that spoke to the innate sort of hopefulness of the world, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and all of your characters ultimately are redeeming. They all are striving to do the right thing, even if it's maybe not for the right reasons sometimes, or begrudgingly. They're being dragged kicking and screaming.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, like, I will say my femme fatale character in the first book, she she certainly has reasons for the things that she does, but she's not a nice person. And I think that was that was common too, right? Like you had a lot of characters that if they're the main character, you could definitely classify them as anti-heroes or anti-heroines because, you know, they're either doing the wrong thing for the right reasons or they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. So
I love those. They're my favorite.
yeah, me too.
So what are your other favorite tropes in the genre? Anything that we haven't touched on already?
One of the things that I love about noir, and I was so pleased to see that this is something that resonates with a lot of people because all of the, you know, so many of the stories that we had, particularly in book 3 in Down These Mean Streets, really did this, was the juxtaposition of darkness versus light in the imagery almost as a metaphor, right? So like there's the very classic you know, the very classic image of like a street light in black and white on a stormy night, you know, where the rain's falling down, you have like this puddle of light onto the concrete, and it's that almost, I'm going to say this word wrong, but like it's like that chiaroscuro sort of darkness light juxtaposition. A lot of the authors really use those sorts of visuals in their stories to really give it that sense of mood and place. And I think that's one of the reasons why it was so prevalent in Down These Mean Streets, is because we were focusing on the city as like, okay, this is, you know, this is such an important part of the story. Like this story could not happen anywhere but this place. The sense of place was so strong that the authors were able to incorporate those visuals in order to really kind of convey that whole idea in ways that I was just continually impressed by. I thought they were gorgeous. So one of them that you know, that really stands out in that one was Griffin Barber's Breathe, which is a fantasy story about a necromancer and the way in which the imagery that he used to tell us about the story about the city where these things are taking place really made use of those like darkness and light visuals. So,
and that one, if I'm remembering correctly, is not urban fantasy, right? It takes place in its own.
It's fantasy, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd call it. Well, so I'd probably call it dark fantasy, honestly, because it's pretty noir. So yeah.
If anything, if fantasy would be, I think Necromancer would be at the top of my list for that too. So I think that's great. Your story in that anthology takes place on Mars. Yep. So tell me about developing that world and how you made the red planet black and white noir.
Well, I kind of just included red in there. So I looked up a lot of the visuals from the photographs taken by the Mars rovers, and it's literally dark there because they're farther from the sun, right? And so I used a lot of the idea of dimness, and it doesn't like. My understanding is, because this was me like doing dirty author tricks, right? So we associate the planet Mars with redness because it looks red, you know, to us through telescopes. But if you're standing on the surface of Mars, the light actually has like a really blue cast to it. I did not lean into the blue cast thing. I leaned further into the red perception, one to match readers' perceptions of what Mars was, but also because it worked really well as a metaphor for blood. Because my story,
of which there is a lot,
because my story was a take on the Jack the Ripper story. It was like, you know, what would a Jack the Ripper case look like on Mars? And so I was able to play with the idea of the darkness from being further from the sun, the cold from again being further from the sun, and sort of the red of the red planet to kind of again give us that sense of place and that sense of sort of foreboding, I guess.
So how hard was it to try to develop a whole world and then condense it down into 10,000 words? Because as far as I know, you've not written in that universe again, right?
I have not yet, no. Maybe I will. I don't know. It would be fun to. I cheated a lot because again, people know where Mars is, right? And so I used a lot of things that are real with regard to Mars. For example, when astronomers and scientists are talking about the day length, they don't call it a day, because a day is defined as 24 hours or whatever. But the period of rotation for Mars is different, so they call it a sol. So instead of saying today, we say to sol, and instead of saying tomorrow, they say sol morrow. And those are real terms, which are awkward to think about. But by using them, I was definitely able to give that idea of like, oh, okay, this is not Earth, right? I also sort of co-opted the trope of like the enclosed settlement, right? And I was able to use the existing maps of Martian terrain to kind of incorporate into that, with the idea of the rich people live up on a settlement on Olympus Mons, which is the tallest mountain in the solar system, and the poor people are stuck down in the in the chasms. Ophir Chasm is an actual like canyon type structure that exists on Mars, and I just got those from a Martian map that I pulled off the internet. So yeah, so I cheated. I used a lot of real world knowledge.
This is the behind the curtain, the tips and tricks, and what makes the magic all come together, right?
Yeah.
So of the 3 stories that you contributed, which was your favorite?
Oh God, which of my kids is my favorite? I mean,
it depends on the day.
That's true. That's a true statement. Well, let me say, I will say that the first story, Spoils of War, really does have a significant place in my heart, because it was sort of the catalyst for the whole thing. And I'm still very proud of the story. I love the feel of it. And I have like a connection to it too, because I set it in Alexandria, which is where I used to live, in Alexandria, Virginia. So like, I got to put things in there that like are real places, and that was that, like that just felt really good to be able to do that. My story in No Game for Nights, I co-wrote with Griffin Barber, which is always such a good time. And that one might be the darkest of the 3 that I wrote. Yes, it's darker than than Jack the Ripper.
That was Faint Hearts, right?
Faint Hearts, yeah. There's a real gritty scene where the main character interrupts a torture session, and it's pretty brutal. But I love working with Griffin, right? We like that. So that story was set in the same world. It's a prequel to our novel, Second Chance Angel, that we co-wrote together, which is to this day still one of my favorite things I've ever written. And then Down These Mean Streets, Ophir Chasm was just fun. I mean, it was just really fun because I've always, like many people, I've always been sort of fascinated by the Jack the Ripper lore. And it was fun to be able to like, okay, well, how would this play out in this new environment with these, these new technologies and stuff like that. So
I'm sure the research for that one got a little grim sometimes too.
Yeah. A little bit, but I tried to, like, the names of my victims in that story, not my victims, the names of the killer's victims in that story.
No, you went real deep. We understand.
I tried to. I'm not a method writer. I tried to kind of pay tribute to the original Ripper victims, with their names and stuff. So yeah.
Well, obviously, these were pretty well received. I mean, you guys got the green light for 3 of them. The most recent one just came out. Was it just last year, I think?
Yeah, it came out in December of 23. So it's been out about a year. And like I said, I think the mass market's coming out this spring.
Soonish, I think.
I have a box of them at my house. So that means they're coming out very soon.
That's true. Fair. Insider knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, so talk to me then about fan reception, right? Like, it's not necessarily a genre that Baen typically publishes. Right. You guys did great at integrating all of these other like elements into it. Do you guys have cool like fan mail or awesome stuff that came out of that?
I've had people tell me at I mean, I haven't gotten any fan mail or anything like that, but I have had people say at conventions like how much they loved the stories, and how much they loved, like, the thing that's been most interesting is that when people talk to me about these stories, they don't talk about like the sci-fi or fantasy aspects of it. They come to me and they're like, I also love Raymond Chandler. Like, so so it's fun to connect with people on that level of like, oh, you like noir stories, I also like noir stories, and uh I've had, I've had several people like really just, they come when we do signings and stuff, that they'll tell me what their favorite story is, or sometimes what they didn't like, but it's an anthology, and part of the diversity of the offerings is part of the fun. So we did have, I will say, I think we had one 1-star review that was like, I don't like stories where it's just collections of stories. And I was like, yeah, that's what anthology means, my guy.
It's the definition. The point, you found it.
So sorry it didn't work for you. It was right there on the cover,
It does make you wonder if they read it, if they tried.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I am a little disappointed that we did not get like a noir signing at LibertyCon when you were Mistress of Ceremonies in like the get up with the pencil skirt and the stockings and everything. So
yeah,
possible missed opportunity there.
I mean, we could certainly do one. We could certainly do one another time, maybe. I was, man, being Mistress of Ceremonies was a busy weekend. So,
yeah, I don't think I saw you like at all that week.
I know. I felt bad. I missed you.
Well, we sold some books for you, so
I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. So, are there more forthcoming?
No immediate plans for any more. But if Bane readers want it, Tony's happy to give Bane authors assignments to do it for you. So if you guys want more, let us know. But right now, no immediate plans to do any for. I mean, it's a trilogy. Seems to work out okay. So
isn't Bane popular for the 5-book trilogies though? Is that not the
yeah, but that just leaves room open. But like I said, right now we don't have any immediate plans to do anymore. But you never know. If you guys want it, make it known.
Yeah. If you build it, they will come also, depending on.
If you buy them, we'll write more.
Yes. That is the reason that we're here. Also for the fun of it.
Right.
But with that, I wanted to ask, you highlighted a couple of them that are already linked to existing universes. So we had Honor Harrington from David Weber. You guys did Second Chance Angel. I recognized a couple of others. Is there anything else that you want to spotlight or say, if you loved this story, go read Second Chance Angel or other ones like that? Because I'm sure there are ones that I missed.
Yes. So we have actually 2 Anita Blake stories. One is in Noir Fatale and the other one is in Down These Mean Streets. They're both excellent. So if you liked those and you have been living under a rock and have never read Anita Blake, go check those out. Sharon Shin's story in No Game for Knights is part of her Shifter universe, which is absolutely excellent. Highly recommended. She's also one of my favorite authors, which was really embarrassing when we were like trying to do podcasts and stuff, and I was like, I just really love your work. I'm like trying real hard to be professional, but failing miserably because I'm a fangirl at heart. But she's a lovely person, and those books are super, super good. I'm trying to think what else. Larry's stories all connect to his existing universes, right? So the first one is a Grim Noir story in Noir Fatale. The No Game for Knights is a Monster Hunter story.
Monster Hunter.
Yeah. And then Down These Mean Streets is from his Lost Planet Homicide series, which is really cool because the actual character is the city, like the city itself, the city's AI. It's really interesting. It's a cool story. And I'm trying to think if there's others that connect. Griffin's Breathe connects to his larger series that we will about the necromancer that we will hopefully see someday soon. And
That one does
sure.
sound very
I'm trying to
fun.
think.
He's told me a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at
Oh, that's
the
so good.
the table of contents
So
now
good.
too to
She's
see if
such a
there were
great
any
character.
others.
Yeah. I think that's mostly it. Oh, Nicole. Her story, her Sybil Lewis story is part of it that fits in with her Sybil Lewis mysteries from Down These Mean Streets, I think. Am I get that right? I'm sure that's right.
I am looking at, like I said, I'm looking at the table of contents.
Yeah, All in the Family by Nicole Gibbons Kurtz. That's part of
Okay.
her long running mystery noir series. And Gutter Ballet by Christopher Rocchio is a Sun Eater story, which is cool. Yeah. So
Cool.
yeah, actually quite a few of them connect. Chris Kennedy's Midnight Ride, I believe, connects to one of his other stories that is a short story that in one of Jamie Ibsen's anthologies. Or actually, no, not Midnight Ride. The one that he did for Down These Mean Streets is one of those. So, yeah, a lot of connections.
Chris is in here. Yeah. I love when authors do that, and I think a lot of people do, because it's like little nuggets and things you wouldn't get normally.
It's like a little bonus.
But then you also feel like you're on the inside as a reader,
Mm-hmm.
as a fan. I can be like, hey, I recognize these names. I know these people already. And then it's like a little love letter, I feel like, to the fans.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Chris, I've got to say, Chris was one of a couple of authors. Scott Hudgens was the other one that when one of our other authors who we had initially invited had to drop out because of like life reasons, and which happens, like no harm, no foul, right? But we were able to go to both of those guys and be like, hey, can you give me something quick? And both of them were like, absolutely. There you go. It's genius. And they were right. So
I am here for that.
Yeah, no, that's my pinch hitters.
And they all have, it's 15 stories each, is that right?
I think 13, if I recall.
13. 1, 2.
Yeah, I think 13.
13. Okay. I can count.
Yeah, we wanted, so just like there's a formula for like, the mix of authors, and just like with a novel, right, where you have like sort of like a certain flow, where you've got like your rising action, your midpoint, all of the above. It turns out that like there are certain things that you look for when you're arranging stories in an anthology to kind of also have a sort of flow to it, and that was one of the things that Tony and Larry both advised me on when putting together Noir Fatale, that I tried to emulate in the subsequent two, where it was like, okay, with the rhythm, like you were talking about, where you have like maybe something's a little bit darker, and so you lighten it up a little bit, and that was a really fun aspect of arranging these stories in such a way that it was going to give the reader or the listener a kind of the appropriate like flow of emotion. Does that, if that makes sense? I felt like a DJ, where you have to arrange songs to keep the party going, as it were.
Well, so Noir Fatale, that was your first anthology that you had ever edited.
Correct.
Did that was that difficult, or did it come kind of naturally to you?
It was actually very easy, but I recognized that the reason that it was so easy is because the contributing authors made it really easy on me. Because they gave me such fantastic stories. The editing that I did was very much along the lines of proofreading, because the stories themselves were so good. Like at no point did I have to go back and be like, hey, structurally this doesn't work. In most part, it was like, hey, you put the twice in this sentence, just typos and stuff. So, and even with the newer authors, right? Like they were structurally all very sound. Um, so I, and everyone was really professional, right? Like they got me their stories on time, or if they needed an extension, they asked for it early, so I knew what was going on. When even the people who had to drop out, like I said, they let me know, so I was able to call my pinch hitters and be like, hey, can you get me something quick? And they were able to do that. So that's the kind of thing that, like, if you are an aspiring writer and you're watching this and you are submitting to anthologies or being invited to anthologies, please have that kind of professionalism. Communicate often with your editor, let them know what you need, and turn in a good story. It makes their life so much easier.
Have fun.
Yeah.
I think and you can tell it comes out when the writers, when you guys are enjoying what you're working on. It makes such a huge difference when you're reading those stories. And they do. I said love letter already a little bit, but that is a lot how it feels. And especially when you are working in such a short, format, you only have so long to get the point out. I think that really gets to shine when you're having a good time, because otherwise short stories are really hard. It can be really hard to write. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, was there anything else that we didn't touch on about these fantastic books that you want to let us know? Any other stories?
For a minute?
Yes. Are they Kurt Miller?
Dominic Harmon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this was the first one. As you can see, she's a very lovely femme fatale. Very lovely.
Guns and buns.
Guns and buns. That's very well said. So funny story. I had never seen this cover, and Tony revealed it at the LibertyCon roadshow, and I was like, it in front of everyone was where I got to see like this for the first time with my name on a Baen book, which was the first. It was an amazing experience, and I was like completely just blown away, and I loved it. Like, I loved that cover. I was like, it's so perfect. It perfectly encapsulates everything that we're trying to do here. And then when we did No Game for Nights, once all three of them are Dominic Harmon covers, we did No Game for Nights, and I'm like, there's no way she's gonna have, there's no way Dominic can top that. There's no way Tony's cover design can top it. And then she comes out with this dude, right? Which is, we had that ass, now we have these pecs with the Baen shield, which is so funny. And I loved it, right? Like, I loved the covers and the sort of like the cyberpunk setting and everything. It was like, again, completely blew me away. So once again, I'm like, all right, well, there's no topping it, right? Like, how do you top those two? Well, the answer is you combine them. So for book 3, we had both of them. And I love that Dominic, that was all Dominic. Like, he, according to Tony, that was all his idea. So I love that we were able to kind of have this like continuity of character just through the cover art, because these are not illustrations of any particular story. It's literally just the cover. And I just thought that was so cool. And I'm like, I have never met Dominic Harmon, but I'm probably going to be really embarrassing if I ever have the opportunity to, because I'm just going to gush over how much I love having his covers.
I have done that recently with a cover artist, so I understand.
So you feel my pain, right? Yeah. So Dominic, if you're watching this, I'll do my best, my friend. I'll try to be a pro.
Well, and they all flow really well, right? Just looking at them on the shelf behind you, that tiny little smidge of blue on Noir Fatale, and the way that it like nosedives into the color schemes on the next two, they're gorgeous. So, and that, don't judge a book by its cover, but also you cannot judge books by their covers. So
right, that's the reason covers exist. So
it makes a difference. They're they're gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. I wish, like I said, I would love to take credit for them, but it was all Dominic, all his ideas. So
it's a good team. I like it.
Yeah, very much.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. I sincerely appreciate it. This has been a joy, as we knew it would be.
It's almost like we're friends in real life.
Almost. Sometimes. It helps, for sure. because this is my first hosting gig for you guys. So thank you for
you
making
did
it easy for
great.
me.
Yeah. No, you did fantastic.
I appreciate it. I owe Griffin something probably for hooking me up with this interview. So. And I loved reading these stories. It was a fantastic experience. There's so many good ones, so many great authors. So
They really
thank
are.
you for convincing Larry and Bane to do it, and hopefully making all the money. As long as that part, like you opened up, deliver expectations. So
right, yeah. Well, it's still a work in progress. They're still for sale, so you guys don't let me down.
Yeah, go check them out. They're super great. So. And once again, so we have Noir Fatale, No Game for Nights, and Down These Mean Streets. They are available wherever Bane books are sold. They all have audio. They're all available in hardcover. We've got mass market paperback for 2 of the 3. You can get the DRM free e-downloads from Bane.com if you want to go check out everything that they have available there. I have been your host, Hailey Gregor. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much, Kacey, for being a phenomenal author and editor. And we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
And now, as promised, one jump ahead. John Moore is a nanotech-enhanced soldier of fortune. Lobo is an AI, a living weapons and intelligence platform of enormous destructive potential. 2 very dangerous wolves in a galaxy of deadly corporate and paramilitary predators. But Moore has grown weary of the killing, and just once he'd like to finish a job without leaving a trail of blood behind him. Not going to happen. Not on a pristine planet called Mackin, where 2 gigantic corporations vie for control of the local jump gate and access to the riches of an undeveloped world. Dealing with a kidnapping and extortion scheme is only the beginning for Moore and Lobo as they work to stay one jump ahead.
Appliances will talk to you directly, though, if you can hear them, speak their frequency, and most importantly, if you can stand them. Most are unbearably dull. Focused solely on their jobs, they yak day and night about waste nutrients in the runoff fluid, or overcooking, or the endless other bits of work-related trivia that compose their lives. Washers, though, are an exception. As part of the disease monitoring system on every even semi-civilized world I've visited, they analyze the cells on everything they clean. What they must and do report is disease. What they love to chat about is all the other information those cells reveal. Whose blood or semen is on whose underwear, who's stretching his waistband more this week than last, who waited so long to put his exercise shorts into the washer that even the gentlest cycle can't save the rotting crotch, and on and on. They're all in the net, of course, like all the other appliances and pretty much everything else man-made, so they pass their gossip back and forth endlessly. They trade their chemical-based news and the bits their voice activation systems record for the scuttlebutt other appliances have picked up, and they all come away happy. The older, stupider models of most appliances have to stop talking when their work taxes their processors, but anything made in the last 50 years has so many spare processing cycles, it never shuts up. My washer was a brand-new Kelco. The owners of my beach house clearly willing to invest in only the best for their rental property, so getting it to talk to me was as simple as letting it know I was willing to listen. Appliances are always surprised the first time we talk, but they're usually so happy for the new and different company that they don't worry much about why we can hear each other. The combination of the changes Jenny made to my brain and the nanomachines the researchers at the prison on Agro merged with all my cells lets me tune in. I suppose it's a blessing, and it certainly is useful, but it came at such a high price that I wouldn't have voluntarily made the trade, and I never mourned for the deaths of the scientists Benny killed on Agro when we escaped. The disaster that followed, that made it impossible for me to know if Jenny is dead or alive, that I mourn. I also mourned for Benny. I wish he could have gotten away too. Of course, my escape wasn't the only good thing to emerge from that disaster. I have to confess, it's also proven useful to be the only person alive who knows that one of the Agro experiments actually survived. Everyone else thinks the disaster there and the subsequent loss of the Pinkelponker system was the result of a huge failure in nanotechnology, a failure that was the catalyst for the ongoing ban on human/nanomachine fusion. I like it that way. As long as no one believes anyone from Agro survived, no one will hunt me. The washer was unfortunately so happy to talk to me that I had to invest a lot of boring hours maneuvering it away from sharing the sex-related gossip it loved to discuss and toward the kind of information I wanted. Who was buying what, which groups were armed, and so on. Apparently, it was more fun and common to check for semen than for explosive residues, laser burns, or stains from weapons-grade lubricants. I spent many of those hours listening to the washer recount intimate details of the randy sex lives of the corporate types who frequented the beachfront resort houses and mansions in Glens Garden. If I hadn't already known it, the washers would have convinced me. Put a man in a bureaucracy, weigh him down with a great deal of stress for a very long time, and his sexual imagination will go places the rest of us would never conceive of. All that time paid off, however, when the washer told me about the kidnapping and the exclusive rights. Armed with that news, I wasn't surprised when Ron Slake came knocking on my door after lunch on a clear, warm day. He looked the standard high-ranking corporate type, a little under 2 meters tall, taller than his jeans would have once have allowed, very nearly as tall as I am, perfectly fit, no doubt from exercise machines. Hair, the thickness and pitch-black color that only enhanced jeans can deliver for more than a few years, and dressed in the white slacks and shirt that have been standard tourist garb on every beach on every planet I've visited. The tourist costume made it clear that he wasn't ready to share the news about Kelco's rights with the locals. I braced myself for a round of wasteful verbal dancing while he wound his way to the point, but he must have ranked higher than I'd guessed, because he came straight to business. "I'd like to hire you, Mr. Moore." "John will do, and I'm not looking for work. I'm here on vacation." "I understand. But from what I can find out about your background, freelance courier who has the trust of some serious banks, former soldier who saw a decade of action, and, perhaps as importantly, what I cannot find out about you, I think you're the type of man I need." I didn't like the thought of him or anyone checking on me, but that was part of the price for stupidly paying rent in advance. "What type is that, Mr. Slake?" "Someone who can get things done." I noticed he didn't tell me to call him Ron. He was definitely a VP or above in Kelco. "They've kidnapped my daughter, and I want her back." He took a small wallet from his pocket, unfolded it several times until it was a thin sheet in front of him, and said, "Jasmine." 3 pictures of a dark-haired teenage girl filled the sheet. She was standing alone against a blank wall, caught perhaps in pondering something weighty. She looked too serious for her age, almost in pain, her nearly black eyes blazing with an intensity that reminded me of Jenny at the same age, right before the Pinkelponker government took her away to heal the people they considered important. I hadn't been able to find, much less rescue, Jenny before they took me away to Agro. "Jasmine is my only child, Mr. John, a luxury I had not planned to permit myself. I never bothered to get to know the maternal surrogate. So Jasmine is all the family I have." "What makes you think I can help?" He looked at me for a few seconds, then glanced away. "We could waste a lot of time doing this, but I want Jasmine back more than I want to observe protocol, so let's try to be efficient. If I'm wrong, and you say so, I'll be surprised, but I'll leave and see how quickly I can import some off-planet talent. I don't think I'm wrong, though. So I'm willing to offer safe passage for you and anything else you want to the planet of your choice, plus 1 million additional credits in the repository of your choice. I've just finished negotiating Kelco's purchase of the exclusive commercial rights to Mackin, and to the new aperture that's growing at the jump gate. So my bonus alone is more than adequate to cover this cost. I didn't need money to live, but I'd need a great deal more than all my accounts held if I ever wanted to try to approach the Pinkelponker system. Fair enough, no wasted time. Though my watcher had already filled me in, getting data firsthand is always best, so I asked, who took her? Some local anti-development group that calls itself the Gardeners. What do they want? To keep the planet exactly as it is. He laughed and looked away, shaking his head slowly, as if that's even possible.
This has been the Bane Free Radio Hour. Thanks for joining us at the heart of science fiction. Join us next week for more One Jump Ahead, and our next interview when Jeremy Como interviews David Weber and Jane Linskold on their latest Honorverse work, Friends Indeed. Score by Ruth Judkowitz.